Who is your real father? For most people, that question has a simple answer. It's written on a birth certificate. It's woven into family stories. It's reflected in old photographs tucked away in dusty albums. It's something most of us never think twice about. But for dozens of adults in the Netherlands, that answer didn't come from their parents. It didn't come from a family conversation. And it certainly didn't come from a doctor. It came from a DNA test. A single genetic match appeared on a computer screen, then another, then several more. At first, it looked like an ordinary family history discovery, the kind thousands of people make every day. But the pattern kept growing, and the results became impossible to explain. People who had never met one another were suddenly discovering they shared far more than distant ancestry. They were half-brothers, half-sisters, complete strangers, connected by the same biological father. And the man at the center of it all wasn't an anonymous sperm donor. He was the fertility specialist their parents had trusted decades earlier, a respected physician, a pioneer in reproductive medicine, a man who had helped countless couples fulfill their dream of becoming parents. Yet years later, DNA evidence would reveal that many donor-conceived adults shared a biological connection to the very doctor who had treated their families. It was a revelation that would shake public confidence in fertility medicine, not only in the Netherlands, but around the world. Because this story isn't simply about biology. It's about trust. It's about consent. And it's about what happens when the person entrusted with your deepest hopes quietly crosses an ethical line. To understand how such a secret could remain hidden for decades, we have to go back to a very different time. The Netherlands of the 1970s was a country embracing scientific progress. Medical breakthroughs were transforming lives, and fertility treatment represented one of the most hopeful frontiers. For couples struggling to conceive, these new procedures offered something many had almost given up on: hope. Back then, infertility wasn't something people openly discussed. Many couples suffered in silence. Some carried the burden for years without telling friends or even close family members. The emotional weight was enormous, and seeking treatment often felt deeply personal. When patients finally stepped inside a fertility clinic, they weren't simply looking for medical care. They were placing their future in someone else's hands. Doctors were trusted almost without question. Medical records weren't as transparent as they are today. Patients rarely asked detailed questions about laboratory procedures. Most assumed that every step followed established medical standards. If a physician explained that donor sperm had been carefully selected and screened, patients accepted that reassurance. Why wouldn't they? The relationship between doctor and patient was built almost entirely on trust, and in fertility medicine, that trust carried extraordinary weight. For many people, these doctors weren't just healthcare professionals. They were the people who made impossible dreams come true. Every successful pregnancy strengthened that confidence. Every newborn reinforced the belief that science, and the people behind it, were changing lives for the better. Very few imagined that the same system capable of creating families could also conceal devastating secrets. But hidden behind consultation rooms and laboratory doors, decisions were being made that patients knew nothing about. Choices that, years later, would reshape entire family trees. By the early 1980s, one name had become increasingly well known among hopeful parents: Dr. Jan Karbat. To many of his patients, he was exactly the kind of doctor they had been searching for. Experienced, confident, calm under pressure, he spoke with certainty about treatments that few people fully understood. For couples who had spent years hearing disappointing news, his confidence inspired optimism. Word of his clinic spread. Families traveled from different parts of the country hoping he could succeed where others had failed. Every healthy baby added to his reputation. Every grateful family strengthened the trust surrounding his work. Patients believed anonymous sperm donors were carefully screened and selected, according to accepted medical practices. Few had any reason to think otherwise. After all, medicine depends on honesty. Consent depends on honesty. And fertility treatment depends on both. For years, everything appeared exactly as it should. Children were born. Families celebrated birthdays. School photographs filled family albums. Parents believed the most difficult chapter of their lives had finally ended. But beneath those happy memories, a secret was quietly growing, one that would remain hidden for decades. Because many of those children shared something no one, not even their own families, could see. A connection written deep inside their DNA. And eventually, science would bring that hidden connection into the light. For years, life moved on. Children grew into adults. Parents watched them graduate, build careers, get married, and start families of their own. Whatever had happened inside the clinic decades earlier seemed firmly buried in the past. There was no reason to suspect otherwise. Most families believed their fertility journey had ended the moment they brought their baby home. The treatment had worked, the dream had come true, and the doctor who helped make it possible remained a respected figure in reproductive medicine. But secrets have a way of surviving quietly, until something unexpected brings them back into the light. In this case, that something was technology. By the early 21st century, home DNA testing had become increasingly popular. People mailed off a small saliva sample for all kinds of reasons. Some wanted to learn about their ancestry. Others hoped to find distant relatives. Many were simply curious about their family history. Most expected ordinary answers. Few imagined they might uncover a family secret. But for several donor-conceived adults in the Netherlands, the results raised questions that no one had prepared them for. Their reports showed unusually close genetic matches with people they had never met. Not distant cousins, not second cousins, half-siblings. At first it seemed impossible. Surely there had been some mistake. But then another match appeared, and another. Each new result told the same story. These weren't isolated coincidences. They were pieces of a much larger puzzle. As more people uploaded their DNA profiles, the connections multiplied. Individuals raised in different cities, born to different families, living completely separate lives, were discovering that they all shared the same biological father. The growing network was impossible to ignore. Many of those making these discoveries began talking to one another. They compared birthdays, family histories, medical information, and one detail kept resurfacing. Their parents had all received fertility treatment at the same clinic. That realization changed everything. What had started as curiosity was becoming a serious question. Had something happened inside that clinic that patients were never told about? Or was there another explanation hidden somewhere in decades-old medical records? No one knew, not yet. But for the first time, families began looking back at their experiences through a different lens. Some former patients remembered details that had never seemed important before. A conversation during treatment, a missing document, records that were incomplete or difficult to obtain. On their own, none of those memories proved anything. Files can be misplaced, memories can fade, administrative mistakes happen. But taken together, they created a growing sense that something wasn't right. Journalists started asking questions. Lawyers became involved. Families who had never met found themselves united by the same search for answers. The clinic that had once represented hope was now becoming the focus of increasing public scrutiny. Yet suspicion alone wasn't enough. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Families didn't want speculation. They wanted certainty. And there was only one way to find it. Unlike paper records, DNA doesn't forget. It doesn't rely on memory. It doesn't change its story over time. Every person carries a genetic record from the moment they're conceived. And if enough people share that record, patterns begin to emerge with remarkable clarity. As more donor-conceived adults compared their DNA results, investigators focused increasingly on one possibility. Could the biological father connecting so many of these families be someone they already knew? Attention gradually turned toward Dr. Jan Karbat. It was a shocking possibility. Karbat had built his career helping people become parents. For decades, he had been viewed as a respected specialist in fertility medicine. The idea that he himself could be the biological father of numerous patients' children seemed almost unimaginable. Yet the growing body of genetic evidence made the question impossible to dismiss. Families wanted the truth, whatever it might be. In 2017, a group of donor-conceived adults and several parents took legal action, seeking access to evidence that could finally answer the questions surrounding Karbat's fertility practice. The case attracted national attention. It wasn't simply about one doctor. It was about informed consent, medical ethics, and the right to know one's biological origins. Dr. Karbat opposed efforts to obtain his DNA while he was alive. But before the legal process reached its conclusion, he died at the age of 89. For some, it seemed the truth might die with him. Instead, the legal battle continued. The court considered whether DNA from Karbat's personal belongings could be compared with the genetic profiles of donor-conceived adults who believed they might be biologically related to him. It was an unprecedented step, and if the court allowed it, science, not memory, would decide the outcome. For years, families had lived with questions that had no clear answers. Some hoped the growing number of DNA matches was simply an extraordinary coincidence. Others feared they already knew where the evidence was leading. Now, everything rested on science. The court had agreed that genetic material from Dr. Jan Karbat's personal belongings could be compared with the DNA of donor-conceived adults who believed they might be biologically related to him. It was an unusual legal step, but so were the circumstances. The goal wasn't to rewrite history, it was to establish the facts. When the comparisons were completed, the findings were clear. DNA confirmed that Dr. Jan Karbat was the biological father of dozens of people conceived through treatment at his fertility practice. For many families, it was the answer they had been searching for. It was also the answer they had dreaded. Years of uncertainty suddenly gave way with certainty. The man they had trusted as a physician was also, in many cases, their biological father. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Netherlands. What had begun as a handful of unusual DNA matches had become one of the country's most significant fertility scandals. News organizations across Europe and around the world covered the story. Medical experts weighed in. Ethicists raised difficult questions, and donor-conceived adults found themselves at the center of a conversation that extended far beyond their own families. The confirmed number of biological children linked to Karbat continued to grow as more people chose to take DNA tests. Each new result added another branch to an already complicated family tree. Some of those newly identified half-siblings decided to meet. They gathered in cafes, living rooms, parks, places where strangers slowly became something else. Many described an immediate sense of familiarity, a shared smile, similar expressions, the same laugh. Small details that suddenly made sense in light of the DNA evidence. Others found the experience overwhelming. Meeting dozens of biological relatives wasn't something anyone had expected. There was no guidebook for navigating relationships created by a secret that had remained hidden for decades. Some embraced the opportunity to connect. Others needed time and distance to process what they had learned. Every journey was different, but all of them had one thing in common. None of them had chosen this story. For the parents, the emotional impact was just as profound. Many had spent years believing they understood how their children had been conceived. They believed they had given informed consent to treatment involving anonymous donors, selected under accepted medical practices. The DNA findings forced many to reconsider those assumptions. Some described feelings of shock. Others spoke of grief. Many wondered whether they could ever fully understand what had happened inside the clinic decades earlier. The fathers who had raised these children faced their own complicated emotions. Biology had changed. Fatherhood had not. They remained the parents who had celebrated birthdays, helped with homework, cheered from the sidelines, and stood beside their children through every milestone. DNA had revealed a biological relationship. It had not erased a lifetime of love. That distinction became deeply important for many families trying to make sense of an extraordinary situation. As the story spread, it prompted a difficult question. If this could happen here, could it have happened somewhere else? Investigations and reporting in several countries later uncovered other cases in which fertility doctors were found to have used their own sperm without their patient's knowledge or consent. Each case had its own circumstances, its own victims, its own legal history, but together, they exposed weaknesses and oversight during an earlier era of reproductive medicine. Practices that once depended almost entirely on professional trust were now being examined through the lens of transparency and accountability. Medical organizations began reviewing historical procedures, regulators strengthened oversight, and lawmakers in some jurisdictions revisited policies designed to protect patients and donor-conceived people. The conversation had shifted. It was no longer only about one doctor. It was about ensuring that such a breach of trust could never happen again. When a court reaches a decision, the legal case eventually comes to an end. Life doesn't. For the families at the center of this story, there was no single moment when everything suddenly made sense. There was no finish line. No day when every question had finally been answered. Instead, there was a new reality to learn. a reality shaped by facts that had remained hidden for decades. For many donor-conceived adults, discovering the truth wasn't simply about identifying a biological father. It was about understanding themselves. Questions they had never imagined asking suddenly became deeply personal. Where did my smile come from? Who gave me my medical history? How many brothers and sisters do I actually have? And why was this kept from me for so long? Those aren't questions a DNA test can answer. It can identify a genetic relationship. It cannot explain the choices that created it. For many families, one truth became clearer than ever. Being a biological parent and being a father are not always the same thing. The men who raised these children were the ones who stayed awake through sleepless nights. They taught them to ride bicycles. They celebrated birthdays, graduations, and weddings. They comforted them after heartbreaks and stood beside them through life's greatest milestones. Those memories didn't disappear because of a DNA result. If anything, many families said they came to appreciate those relationships even more. Love had never been determined by genetics alone, and it wasn't about to start now. Still, biology matters. Medical history matters. Identity matters. For donor-conceived adults, knowing the truth can influence healthcare decisions, future relationships, and a person's understanding of where they come from. That's why many advocates argue that openness and transparency should be central to reproductive medicine. Knowledge doesn't erase pain, but it can replace uncertainty. Fertility medicine has changed dramatically since the 1970s and 1980s. Today, many countries have far stricter regulations governing donor conception. Detailed record-keeping, independent oversight, limits on donor use, clearer informed consent procedures, and increasingly, recognition of the rights of donor-conceived people to understand their biological origins. No system is perfect, but the lessons from past failures continue to shape how reproductive medicine is practiced today. Trust remains the foundation of every medical relationship, yet trust alone is no longer considered enough. It must be supported by accountability, transparency, and ethical safeguards designed to protect patients and future generations alike. Because medicine is at its best when compassion and integrity move together. When either one is missing, people can be harmed in ways that last a lifetime. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this story isn't how the secret began, it's how it finally ended. For decades, documents could be misplaced, records could be destroyed, memories could fade, but DNA kept its own record, quietly, patiently, waiting for the day someone would ask the right question. Science didn't create the truth, it simply revealed it. And once that happened, there was no putting the story back into the shadows. For many of the people involved, the search wasn't about revenge, it was about honesty. About finally understanding a chapter of their lives that had never made sense. About reclaiming a part of their identity that had been hidden since the day they were born. The answers were painful, but they were real. And sometimes, the truth, however difficult, is the first step toward healing. Stories like this remind us that extraordinary advances in science carry extraordinary responsibilities. Every medical breakthrough changes lives, but every breakthrough also depends on something far more fragile than technology: trust. When that trust is honored, families are created. When it's broken, generations can spend years searching for answers. The story of Dr. Jan Karbat continues to be discussed, not only because of what was uncovered through DNA, but because it challenged long-held assumptions about medical authority, informed consent, and the rights of donor-conceived people to know the truth about their own origins. For the families whose lives were forever changed, the past cannot be rewritten, but the truth is no longer hidden. And sometimes, that's where justice begins. Not with revenge, not with headlines, but with the simple act of bringing the truth into the light. Every family has a story. Every secret leaves a mark, and every truth leaves a shadow. If this case made you think, we'd love to hear your perspective. How should fertility medicine balance donor privacy, patient trust, and the right of donor-conceived people to know their biological origins? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoy deeply researched true crime documentaries that explore the human stories behind the headlines, consider subscribing to Shadow Case Files and turning on notifications so you never miss a new investigation. Until next time, stay curious, question what you're told, and remember, Every mystery deserves a voice. This is Shadow Case Files.